Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about media and virtual production, any questions that you might have. Second hour is something we want to spend a little bit more time on. And today we're going to be talking about green screen. A lot about green screen, shooting green screen, because it's the same. We do all the same things, but we'll talk a little bit about removal as well. And then tomorrow, we'll talk about managing talent. If you'd like to see more about what we're planning for the rest of the week, you can go up to officehours.global. Let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Bill, what do we have?
Our first one is exciting. Chad Lafarge just spilled the tea, saying after lighting the candle last week in Vegas, is John Pretto's family lighting candles today in celebration of his birthday?
All right.
Before we start, let me do this.
No. Okay.
There, we gotta
right.
get the key.
All right. No, that's okay. So we found that if you just follow one person and you do it slowly, it works out relatively well. So I'll start it, and we'll all go through that. We'll all muscle through it. All right, here we go. Happy birthday to you, John. Happy birthday to you, John. Happy birthday, dear John. Happy birthday to you.
Anymore.
Awful.
At least we were in key.
I'm going to push back about slow. That needs to happen as fast as possible.
No, it's way worse. It's way worse when it's fast. It just turns into cacophony. All right.
And Lindsay closes his eyes so he can't watch the pain.
No, I have to think because I have to listen to only myself. It's hard because I have the headphones in. And I'm sitting there like, don't listen to them, don't listen to them, don't listen to them. All right.
Well, and then Pretto was starting to nod his head. So he's like, who do we watch? Who do we watch?
Happy birthday, John.
Happy birthday, John.
All right. All right. Next question.
Next question comes up from John Snyder in Reno, Nevada. My AirPods Pro are incredibly vigorous in deciding what device I want to listen to. Is there a way to keep them connected to my iPhone and only connect to other devices when I ask, like my Apple TV does?
Go ahead, Matteo.
Yes, they are indeed very, very vigorously trying to grab onto everything they can. What you have to do is connect your device onto your Mac, for example, and then you go onto the preferences on your Bluetooth preferences, and you look for your device. In this case, AirPod Bob. You've got a little button that says Options. When you click on Options, you will be able to modify. Sorry about that. You will be able to modify the. I just lost the screen. It's coming back. You will be able to modify the option, and you have connect to this Mac, and you have to select when last connected to this Mac. That way, it will only connect once you ask it to connect. Same thing on any other device. You have to go on the Bluetooth preferences and change the option. Otherwise, they will keep connecting all the time.
Oh, yeah. It's so annoying. Yeah, that's a great answer. It has been, I have to admit that the more devices that I have around, the more it became frustrating. And I still have trouble with it. Like even when there's only one device by itself, suddenly it just decides I'm not going to be connected to this right now. I feel like trying to make it easy made it somehow harder. So, but that's a great tip to hopefully handle most of it. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Nick Batt in the UK. He says, looking for a scriptable batch video encoder that will take advantage of M1 encode speeds. Currently using handbrakeCLI, but it maxes out at 50 frames per second on 1080 footage. I should be able to get much higher on the M1.
Go ahead, Sky.
I'm going to suggest Media Encoder by Adobe because it has a great capability of very flexible, but we also use the Blackmagic Resolve. It seems to be the Swiss Army knife. And in a post-production facility, that was our tool of transcoding many things all at once.
Yeah, if you're looking for someone's mic's open. I can't. I'm sorry. It's like if you are looking to take full advantage of the M1 compressor, is probably the one you want to use with AppleScript. That's going to be the one that's probably the most optimized for the M1. Typically Adobe's a little behind on the updates, and so they're usually not going to take full advantage of the M1, while Apple might have some internal information about how to optimize their apps for it. So I would look at compressor. Let's go to the next question.
Graham Cardwell's up next from Belfast in Northern Ireland. And Graham says, I've been asked to set up a free Dropbox account for a project, but it only offers 2 gigabytes of storage. Any good, free, reliable options out there that offer more than 2 gigabytes? Thanks.
All right, go ahead, Sky.
Well, again, we used the Google box concept, and it was a bit of a challenge for us because there's probably some settings that we didn't click, but everybody had to use up their space, even though the bucket that we're throwing into had a large concept. So I'm just saying maybe not Google Drive if you need more than 2 gigs.
Yeah, I think once you get over a certain number of gigs, you're going to need to pay for it. Usually most of these aren't very expensive. I mean, I think Google has an option to pay for more, so does Dropbox, of course.
And Dropbox has that 6-person family account that's very useful.
Yeah, and they're not $10, $25 a month kind of thing. I mean, I know that can be expensive and it adds up over time, but you are putting storage in the cloud. Go ahead, David.
Sony Media Cloud, Sony C, has a 5 gig free trial, which might get you over the hump.
But it's just a trial, right? It doesn't, or is it last?
I've had mine for quite some time, the free one. So,
and there you go. Sony, it's the Sony
Media Cloud. Yeah, or they call it CI or C. Is how it's pronounced.
That's great. We keep on meaning to get those guys on, so we'll work on that. Next question.
Peter Belbin's up next from Houston, Texas. He says, I tried the YouTube of yesterday's office hours and find that indexes do not appear to be taking into account that the video includes the pre-roll content. Which way do you think it will be fixed? Cut the pre-roll or adjust to include the pre-roll or something else maybe?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So basically with every video, what happens is I have to go in and I have to take out the tips, or basically that countdown. When I do that, I also put in the list of questions into YouTube. So, and of course I adjust for the time that we just took off on the top. So for a brief amount of time, those questions do not line up with the video until the full video gets processed, because you still get to see the older version of the video till the new video can replace it. And so if you went back and you looked at that, everything should be lining up. There are times where mistakes do happen. Let me know if that happens.
And thanks for the work, Jeffrey. Jeffrey does this every day to make sure that happens and that you have it. Really, really great work. It really makes a difference. Obviously, people notice when it's not lining up. So thank you. Next question.
TJ Asher in Minneapolis, Minnesota says, how should I identify myself in Mukana if I don't want to see a flag icon next to my name when the questions are displayed, yet I still want to identify my location?
I think you just don't put US at the end, or I don't know, we'd probably do, I think if you didn't put that, I guess it would look at MN. So, but if there's not a 3 or 4 digit thing on the end, I don't know if it'll put a flag in there. We should look at it. We should probably have like NF, no flag, if you don't want a flag. Yeah, we'll take a look at that. We'll have a look at it on the back end. Next question.
Comes from our own Chris Fenwick in Emeryville, California. Are we getting any better at singing happy birthday? Maybe we could practice on Pretto today, 59, and feeling every bit of it. So this is obviously a reflection of what happened in the beginning of the show.
Yeah, go ahead, David.
Let's go to the videotape. I'm sorry.
No, let's not.
Where's it? Hey, where's EVS operator for 88? All right. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So I couldn't find my pitch pipe, so I ended up doing the harmonica. That's what I wanted to do at the beginning. So at least we had a beginning tone to start with. So I will find the pitch pipe and I will have it for next time.
Here's the funny thing is we did improve it one day. One of the ones very early on, we improved it because I did a little animation that had it, like a bouncing ball animation, and we were really close to being good. And I actually felt like it took something away from it. I felt like the informal car wreck was kind of the kind of part of the charm. So we were working on improving it, and then I stopped because the first one I was like, well, if we get much better at this, it actually will be odd. But maybe we'll go back to it. The key is to have somebody play a video that has the words popping up, because then everybody sees it pretty much at the same time. And then, then we could have rehearsals. We could have happy birthday rehearsals and after hours, and we could all, get really good at it. We could figure out who's doing what part of the harmonies. I have to admit, it would be kind of fun, but too much work. People would be like, that's weird.
Look out, Mormon Tabernacle Choir.
Yeah, exactly. Probably not.
I think not.
I don't think we have the genetics for that or the skills. Next question.
Dennis Champion Walker in Mansfield, UK is up next. He says, I uploaded macOS 12.3 last night, and now Mail.app's search tool doesn't find matches for things that are clearly in my inbox. Has anybody else seen this behavior?
Yeah, the one place that you'll see, so basically the search directory has been either deleted or corrupted. It will rebuild itself over time, but I don't know of any way to force it to rebuild. The other place that you'll find that is if your drive runs out of space. So let's just say you accidentally set your Final Cut, not that this has ever happened to me, but you accidentally set your Final Cut scratch to your home drive instead of an external drive. Then it fills up the drive and it fills up the system memory, and then Mail stops working. And then once you fix that, Mail doesn't search for sometimes a week. It's a good reason to keep your scratch drives off your computer and make sure that you have plenty of drive space. I've not seen it happen with an update in the past, but that's what's happening. There's a search directory that's constantly crawling. You may notice that also that your search in general may not work as well for a little while because it's trying to do it in the background. So the more you use your computer, the less it does. Go ahead, John.
There's a utility that I have called Onyx that can be used to rebuild the index. And so I'll post a link to that in Mukana.
That's great. Next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas is up next. Camera control for the M1 Mini Mac. What's the best of the couple of dozen apps suggested in the Apple App Store?
Jeffrey?
First of all, I'd like to talk about Duet, which is a great app that for your iPad, it'll allow you to create.
I think this is controlling webcams, right?
It is controlling webcams, and that's where I'm going. You could actually bring your webcams over to that. But the other thing with the iPad is that top director we talked about yesterday on the second hour. I downloaded that and started using that for the iPad. It's a great way for bringing NDI feeds in there, so you can control off the M1 Mac as well.
Yeah, and I think that I don't know if the one that we usually use is webcam settings, and I haven't tested to see if it works on. It's working on Monterey, so I assume, but I don't know if it's working on the M1 or not. I haven't put it on any of my M1s yet, but webcam settings is the one I've used the most. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is up next. In a photo of the modernized NASA Kennedy Space Center Firing Room 1, you can see the distinctive outline of Blackmagic design monitors above the Evertz router panels. Wouldn't you want a higher-end brand for a life-critical application?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, you got to realize that NASA operates under a budget, and they can't spend a whole lot of money. And they probably chose that Blackmagic display because it's configurable via over Ethernet and can be remotely configured easily. But like everyone, they have a limited amount of money to spend.
And often it sounds like when you see an Evertz next to a Blackmagic, it was one group was paying for the Evertz and the other group was paying for the monitors, and they had different opinions about what should be done. That's what typically happens in that kind of place, in that kind of situation. When you see something that the two things that are very different, it means that they're coming out of different budgets. Next question.
Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas says, do you notice any subtle differences in Zoom's app behavior on iPhone versus Android?
Rupert, do you notice any subtle differences?
I've noticed one, at least. Android Zoom on Android seems to, when you have it in, when you have the phone in landscape mode and it's working as expected. If the meeting crashes or disconnects for any reason, the app seems to recover still in landscape mode. On an iPhone, the app seems to, in the same scenario, seems to default back to portrait mode, which is kind of annoying if you've got it all set up correctly. That's one problem I found. I'm just wondering what others I could watch out for.
The only one we were talking about, I think, yesterday was that, and I don't know about whether it's different on the Android or not, but when you have, I was complaining about something and it was pointed out that I complained that when I open up my photo app, it wouldn't show video. Like there was no video options, and I was frustrated. And it turns out, I don't remember who suggested this, but if Zoom's open, it's accessing the camera, and then the camera is not being made available to the camera. I mean, the hardware camera is not being made available to the camera app, and it was because I was on a walk in the woods, listening to After Hours and trying to take pictures of flowers. So anyway, that was the piece that I didn't realize. And so I don't know whether that'd be interesting to test on Android, is whether the camera is available both to the camera app as well as to Zoom at the same time. because it's I don't know how often people run into that. I just couldn't figure out what it was. It's because a lot of times I'm listening to After Hours or something, and I'm doing other things, and I keep on running into this problem because I didn't realize that it was After Hours in the background, or that Zoom's taking advantage of the phone, even if the camera is muted. That's the thing that's probably a bug. Next question.
Peter Belbin in Houston, Texas is up next. If I'm entertaining getting an HDR capable monitor, which HDR standard is the one to look for and being supported by the monitor? Is HDR10 okay, or should I look for something else?
I buy all my monitors to make sure that they're supporting Dolby Vision. If they support Dolby Vision, they support everything else like that. So if you look for Dolby Vision, that's the one that I would look for. If you're not going to get Dolby Vision, if you find some Samsung or something that isn't Dolby Vision, you want HDR10 plus. So HDR10 plus is about 80% of Dolby Vision. So basically, what happens is that HLG has no metadata. It just goes, so it's the kind of the dumb one, it just does the thing that it needs to do. But it's really good for production because we don't have to deal with metadata. Metadata is data that's going along with it, that's giving us the most bright points, the mid points, some of the color trims, et cetera. Now, HDR10 puts that metadata in, but only for a whole file. So the whole thing is going to be one thing, and it's saying, okay, this is your highlight, this is your midpoint, and then might have some color trims in it. What HDR10 Plus and Dolby Vision do is they do that every frame, so that way you can adjust for scenes and adjust for things. And so there's a lot more data, but you have to have a TV that can actually understand what it's getting. So I would recommend Dolby Vision because it'll support everything under it generally. If it goes through the trouble of supporting Dolby Vision, it'll support all the other platforms. Next question.
Kenneth Jones, Seattle, Washington, up next. Zoom says they, quote, will be updating your marketplace pre-approval setting for publicly listed apps to allow users to freely add apps without admin approval as of the new default on April 18th, 2022. Is this good, bad, or inconsequential, he wonders?
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, we needed this last year. We wrote a registration app, and we had to go through this approval process, and it was a pain, and I'm glad they finally did it.
Yeah, absolutely. Rupert?
So it is just, changing the default. So in a corporate or enterprise environment where that kind of control is important, those administrators will still be able to lock that down or change the default if they want for their environment. From a consumer level, it's obviously going to reduce the friction in people getting hold of those apps. And I'm sure the app developers, just like John said, will appreciate the removal of that friction too. But of course, across the board, I think it needs to be coupled with just ongoing user education that they should be aware of what they're installing, why, and who those developers are.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Yeah, I was going to add that from a enterprise standpoint, as it was mentioned, we're not happy about that kind of thing, and so we would definitely lock that down. And from a cyber security point of view, that would cause us to freak out. So, really glad that they put in the controls that allow us to disable that.
Next question.
Next one comes from Kenneth Jones in Seattle. Yesterday afternoon, my Apple TV box turned on my television. Although I'm a generally friendly fellow, how do I keep the neighbors from operating my hardware?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, you want to go into your television set and maybe turn off CEC, which is allows anything that comes in over an HDMI input to control switching the inputs and turning on and off the TV. And if you turn off CEC control, it'll stop your Apple TV from turning on your TV. Then you'll still have to manually turn on your TV every time you want to watch your Apple TV, though.
Go ahead, Rupert.
I'm not sure whether in this case that explains what triggered the Apple TV to want to come on in the first place. Just in general, I have encountered in the past, remote control devices doing strange things, particularly if they are IR controlled. And that's usually, in my experience, although it's just an edge case, due to some kind of IR interference or reflections in the room rather than, literally an outside signal.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I find this kind of capability to be a blessing and a curse. I've down to one remote control for my living room because, and I use my Apple TV remote control because it will trigger my Sony TV to come on after I've set it up correctly. But occasionally they get out of sync and it's a little bit of a hassle. So these simple things can be either a blessing or a curse depending on how much time you want to put into managing them, I think.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Another thing I find I've got a TV in the kitchen it's not hooked up to an HDMI input. It does have a remote control that's hidden from the TV. It's in a drawer, so I know it's not getting accidentally triggered, but it'll come on in the middle of the night. And what I finally figured out is it's a glitch in the power. Sometimes a small dip in the power will cause the TV to trip and come on automatically when it partially restarts.
Let's go to the next question.
TJ Asher in Minneapolis says, what's the best tripod and head combo to take with me on vacation? For my Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K, there will be air travel involved, and yes, I said best.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, it depends on what lens you're going to slap on that. If you're shooting like birds and you're going with the longer, like 300 millimeters or something like that, and what battery you're going to use, if you're going to fully populate it with a rig. And I'd be going with the Sockler series, probably the Ace or something with the Flowtech carbon fiber legs. If I'm just trying to hold it up and going really run and gun style, there's some really cheap ones from Me Photo. Benro seems to be the brand that we're seeing that's most popular that's selling through our store. This is a good example of why to go to NAB, though, because this is where you can try the Z test, as we call it, where you can pick one finger. Once you got the thing dialed in and calibrated, you can move it in a Z pattern and see how it moves.
Yeah, go ahead, Rupert.
If you want the best, and if air travel's the restriction, then I would suggest a charter flight or a private jet.
I have found that you can put a lot of Pelican cases in the back of a G4, in case you're wondering. Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, so the one that's always been on my Christmas list and Santa has yet to deliver is the Peak Design. I really like the look of that. They do a carbon fiber one. It's about 12 to 14 inches long. It'll take 20 pounds and appears to be, if you have no money limits, the one I would take on my travel.
Right, go ahead, Jeffrey.
I'm going to give an alternative answer, and that is a monopod. And I've got this one right here from Surui, which is a great carbon fiber monopod I've used for a lot of run and gun type stuff. But the biggest thing I like about this is the feet. The span is so long. I've put a lot of stuff on the top of this head and had it sitting right in the middle of traffic, and it works perfectly. So this is the other thing is you pick it up and you can move to the next spot, set it right down, and your camera gear is good. There's been only one time that somebody's actually run into this and knocked it over.
Good, Bill.
For me, size and weight is more important than anything else. Yes, I love fabulous, good quality heads and cameras. I usually take this on vacation with me. It's one of the Manfrotto Be Free series. It folds up so small, and the case is so small that literally it's just easy to toss in something. And there's nothing more annoying than being on vacation and having a 4.5-foot case you have to lug everywhere you're going. So I'd go with as small and as light as you can get. Carbon fiber would be helpful.
Yeah, the ones that I've enjoyed the most when traveling with carbon fiber is the Peak Design line. Is got just incredible. They're about $600-700, but they're really nice. I like monopods as well. I carry a monopod when I'm traveling really light. I have a Manfrotto one, but I think Jeffrey's is nicer than mine. And I use a Rush 24 pack, a tactical 511 Rush 24 pack, and you can get a rifle seat for it. And so what you do is that sits really nicely. If you use the webbing going across it, you can drop that right into there, and it sticks out just a little bit. The tripod sticks out a little bit, but the rifle piece keeps it from sliding through. The alternate is you use like three crosses of the Velcro, and you click through underneath one leg and then click over the leg, and that'll hold it as well without the seat. And what's nice about that is that it's not another piece of luggage, so it's connected to your pack, and it'll be considered part of your carry-on pack. That's not part of everything else, and now you have either a light tripod or a monopod in that group. So something else to think about. Next question.
Eric Antonio in Washington, D.C. Is there a way to search the questions asked, specifically Jeffrey's entries, in the past of the first hour office hours discussions? Thanks.
I'll go ahead, Jeffrey.
So if you go to YouTube and you do the main search, that will that could pull it up. But the bigger thing to do is to actually go to the office hours global page. There's a second search. If you go a little bit farther down, you'll see a little the magnifying glass. Click on that. That'll bring over the search, and then put in the question that you're looking for, and you'll get a better selection of answers.
Yeah. again, credible work by Jeffrey and by Ken Jordan to make that possible. It's really great. Go ahead, Rupert.
Yeah, and if you happen to be on the YouTube channel, you can go to the channel itself, go to the videos tab, and then you get a search button there also for the which will search the YouTube video descriptions. If it's something on the same day that you want to look up, you can also just drop back into Mukana before it gets reset and scroll up through the questions there, and it'll show there. If it's anything that contained a link, then you can also check out Discord.
Next question.
Molly Ice in Atlanta says, would love to know if anyone has experience working with KUDO language, KUDO, solution for Teams, good or bad things to say or pay attention to. And she's got a link there.
I will say the video looks quite nice on that link. What this does is it allows you to basically hire interpreters remotely and have it all built in, so you don't have to think about it. So the idea is that I want an interpreter, and you can simply say, I need in these languages. These interpreters have been kind of set up for this, or their companies have. And so you can schedule them, pay them, everything else through the system. And without having to, finding interpreters can be challenging. Now, what I will say, I don't have experience with KUDO, but I will say the quality of interpreters, when they're talking about the numbers that they're talking about, I don't know, it's a lot of potential interpreters. When you talk about those kinds of numbers, your mileage may vary. In anything that you do. So I think that is because the reality is the most in-demand interpreters will not work in a system like this, because they're getting paid more, and it's a much more they're usually contracted for long periods of time for larger clients. And so you may not have the tier 1 interpreters. They may still be very good, but you may not be getting tier 1 from the solution. So there's a lot of demand right now, because accessibility has become more important to folks, and because tools to get interpreters lined up have become more efficient. Now what's happened is, there's always some kind of kink in the pipe, and the kink in the pipe is the number of interpreters available. And so it's, it'll be, I think that the challenge that you'll have with it right now, and again, I haven't used it, but the challenge that you'll have is mileage will vary, in that process. Also, you just want to manage people's expectations with interpretation, with captioning, subtitling, etc. That when you do it live, it will be not as accurate, as someone will always complain. So just know that when you turn these things on, a native speaker who speaks English and Spanish and French and German will invariably send you complaints. Like, I really think they shouldn't have, called that this, and you just have to know that that's part of what's happening. There's nothing you can do about it. People get the gist of what they're saying, and sometimes I would say most of the time it's 85-90% accurate in an interpretation, or 85-90% that everyone agrees on it. Next question.
Molly Eisen is right back with the next highest rated question. Similarly, would love to know if anyone has experience using Room Manager, and she links roommanager.com there. Developer based out of Switzerland. Has anyone worked with them and have any feedback to share, perhaps?
I do not know about Room Manager. I don't even know what it does. Molly, it looks interesting. Yeah, I haven't used it. So and it looks like you might have stumped us. If you find information, it'd be good. Yeah, go ahead, David.
I think it's similar to the app space for hoteling, basically, kind of situations within corporate. We're looking at app space for desk reservation, etc. But I'll dig into that one a little bit.
Yeah, that'd be great. It'd be great to get your feedback. Let us know if you come up with anything. Next question.
Comes from Jeff Vreeland in Indianapolis, Indiana. I have started using an IFB earpiece for what feels like hours of Zoom meetings each day. One thing I'd like is for it to be wireless. Is there any recommended transmitter receiver I can use for Windows?
Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, so I think it was Alex's suggestion. I used the Rode Go 2s, which allow with 2 transmitters, 1 receiver. So I use this particularly for office hours, where I have the program feed in one ear and the talkback in the other, so I'm able to separate out. If you just wanted to listen to stereo, you could clearly use both transmitters. I also managed to find quite cheaply on Amazon a little charging caddy for it, so when they're not in use, they're just in the charging caddy.
Good, Courtney.
Yeah, the professional style, the one that professionals use, is the Phonak Invisity, which is a tiny little earpiece that goes in your ear. It's about $1,200.
That's so great.
And you still have to get a Comtech transmitter that's 216 megahertz transmitter that will transmit to them, but they have a pretty good range. You could cover your entire house with them, and they're almost invisible.
And you use I think there's a 216 and a 75, right? For the
I don't know if they make that. I think both of them have been discontinued, but the 216 is the most recent one. The 75, I think that frequency band has been
taken away.
Somebody else. Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead, Rupert.
I would just recommend just not overlooking the option of a cable. I have this long 20-foot cable clipped on my belt, clipped to the desk, so it just enables me to roam around without the variations of wireless.
Go ahead, David.
Yep, and to Nigel's point too, I have the old first-gen Rode, use it in reverse, putting the computer into the mic element and headphones into the other. Works pretty good.
Hey, go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I didn't say no budget, so at the top end, let's say the Electrosonics Duet Series EM2 T. You can even use Dante. I was going to say something by Sennheiser, but it's on embargo until April 5th. But if you're going to buy something, don't buy anything until April 5th. And there might be something good coming out on April 5th. And then last, there's the CAD audio in-ear monitors. I'd take a look at those once they're only $199.
Do you have anyone at Sennheiser that might want to come on our show on April 5th?
Or 6th?
Yeah, I'm sure. They're kind of a strange company. Well, Apple's like this too, where they'll send out an engineer plus a salesperson. So generally the engineer knows everything and can answer all the highly technical questions. And then you get the salesperson that's like, the highly outgoing type.
Yeah. Our favorite. It'd be fun to get someone on office hours talking about it if it's that exciting. Anyway, yeah. The phone acts are great. The problem, one of the things with the phone act is that you don't have the same audio quality. So you can hear people talking, but you can't make any qualitative decisions about what that actually meant. I mean, like what their quality is. So for me, I find that something that's these little ones that I got that aren't that expensive, the Z10s or whatever, are working out well. The Linsols, that I can hear everything. Obviously, I can hear every mic opened and all the other things. When you use a regular IFB, all you hear is just basically the words. So next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. He says, have you ever had instruments, synthesizers, for example, that you were excited about when you first got them, but then it feels less inspired as time goes by? What has helped restore that initial inspiration?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yes. There's been many things that I've reviewed that I was very excited to get, and then I got it, and I found that it was not. There were some problems with it that really frustrated me. Like, for instance, problems with feedback or line noise and things like that, where I couldn't give them a good review. The first thing that I go to is just go up to YouTube and see what other people are doing with it, and playing with it, and then just kind of do just even some more research. That's how I got into the stylizer, because of the fact that I was looking at another product, another synthesizer, and found out about this song and how somebody used the stylizer for it, and it just really sparked my attention. And so, yeah, just keep doing some research and seeing what other people are doing with it, and hopefully that'll re-spark the idea of whatever synthesizer you're working on.
Go ahead, Courtney.
And I have a whole room full of synthesizers I've lost interest in, Douglas. It happened. I have a Kurzweil K2000 that I upgraded to sample input. It's a wonderful machine. And every now and then, when you get older, then they become vintage. And then you can go back and restore them to their original luster, and it becomes a new project for you that can be very profitable. So hang on to them, and eventually they'll spark your interest again in the vintage market.
Yeah, whatever you do, don't get rid of them. I got rid of. For a long time, I had an EMU Emax 2 that I really liked, and I gave it to someone because they needed it for their house burned down. They were a musician. And they were like, I was like trying to help them get off the ground, and I still miss that. my Emax. Next question.
Serge Blondin in Montreal, Canada says, using OBS on a Mac to screen grab my meter, I see a 38% CPU usage. Which software can the panel recommend that will use less CPU cycles?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, OBS is. I'm still telling people not to use OBS on Macs. They're just the metal's not there. Therefore, it's just going to kill your CPU usage. Ecamm is a great one as an alternative. You can also do NDI. doing a screen capture, but there are some limitations because there's certain screens that NDI will not capture. And I actually talked with Hasmukh and TJ about this. And so just give it a try, test it out, see what that works, if that works for you.
Next question.
Stefan in Würzburg, Germany says, what are your strategies to deal with username account names on your Mac? Do you use admin accounts and personal named accounts, or only personal names with admin rights?
Go ahead, David.
Yeah, I'll usually set up Mac with an admin account and then generate user accounts for it. If you need to auth in for installation, just pass the admin account in. That way keeps the things separate and clean and less danger of messing things up.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
I'm just going to answer this from my personal security perspective. I don't like using personal names on my personal devices. So I'll put aliases on my Mac for people that have admin accounts and user accounts. And I just rely on me knowing which is which, who has admin rights and that kind of thing. But I also put a secondary account that I often name something else. And I got this again from MacBreak Weekly, which is to have, and listening to Leo Laporte too, to have a secondary account that has admin rights but never gets logged into. That way, whenever I'm troubleshooting, I can log into that and see if it's something wrong with my Mac or something wrong with my account. And then if I have admin rights on that one, I can have a better chance of fixing it. I can blow away my old profile and add a new one. So that's one other tip I would add.
Go ahead, Matteo.
Well, I think now I have not much to add after what John said. I was just going to say it's security-wise, it's very, very important not to have your names and to use just normal accounts and to not log on to admin accounts. Also, because if you get a malware or any sort of virus, if you have no admin rights, is somehow safer. It can do less damage somehow. That's it.
Go ahead, Bill.
Just a real quick caveat. We're talking about your individual computer, and that's one thing. There's also your ID inside Apple, and I've had all sorts of issues because I had my son gave him an account, and we bought a lot of music, and he wasn't using it for a while, so I bought some things. Trying to merge that top-level Apple account is a nightmare. This is not the same as what you're doing on your individual computer, but just don't mistake what we're talking about now in terms of adding sub-accounts as something that you can do across the Apple stuff. You should really have one Apple ID account and guard that jealously and make sure that you keep it as clean as possible. Don't do work under multiples because getting them together at any point is a nightmare.
Next question.
Todd Davis in Hutchinson, Kansas says, I use Linsol KZ XR10 Pros. The cable that came with it is too short. Is there a longer cord or a recommended extender?
Yeah, go ahead, Danny.
Yeah, I'm using the same. Always wondered why do they always, come with a short cable? Only to realize that most of the time it's just the right length if you're connecting it to a wireless body pack receiver. So what I do now is that I just get an extender because there are times that I need to have this on and then play my guitar that is plugged in. And the only way that I can get enough length where things just don't get tangled up is to use a cable extender.
Go ahead, Rupert.
Like I said before, I'm a big fan of this long coiled one I've got. It's 25 feet and this hasn't failed me in over 2 years. And whenever you're using extenders, though, I like to tether them to the, I like the coiled ones because you don't have a lot of tension. If you, you walk up and get up and not realize it, you can feel the coil springing on you before, like a solid extension might just start, pulling stuff off your desk. But I tether it to the desk, and there's some magnetic options for doing that also. But I'll leave a link to the one that I use.
Sorry, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, just an extension. I've ordered some of these from Amazon, which are nice because they're a mini plug extension. They have a braided cotton cover cable, so they're pretty impervious to being yanked or run over by the chair, which happens all the time. And, I'd be careful about coiled. Having used coiled cables on headphones for decades, I find that they tend to fail more often because when you stretch them out, they tend to rotate, and when they rotate, they tend to break the solder connections in the end. So watch out for that.
Go ahead, David.
And don't forget those angry audio headphone buddy things that I put in a while back. I don't have them here. I'll bring a pair in from home, but those things save my bacon a lot of times.
Yeah. I think I order ones. I have a tendency to order ones from Ugreen. I think it's on Amazon. They're like $8 each or whatever. They're metal braided on the outside. And I agree that the coils, drive me a little crazy. Next question.
Michael Forrest in London in the UK. How would you attach acoustic foam panels in a rented space?
Go ahead, Sky.
I was thinking you would make a frame before you would put the frame up on the wall, 2x4s or any other material that you could attach the foam panels to. But then you'd only have significant holes that you would want to hold that frame up rather than gluing the panels onto your wall. That would be a mess afterwards when you try to leave.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I used to be in an apartment where you couldn't put nails up, and that I think this is where this question's going. So you have to find different ways, find stands. You can actually make a faux wall, like just basically go get a piece of paneling and then put some wood behind it, put it on a stand. Partitions from offices are really great alternatives to acoustic foam. And then you can also do something like put up a shelving system and then just put the little foam panels right on top, make little stands for them or something like that, and then put them right on top of the cabinet or whatever you buy.
Good, Bill.
Sticky Velcro. You can put Velcro on the back of your panels, put it on your wall, and you'll be able to mount them with that. If you want to go to the next level, there are the things called command strips from 3M. They're a hook and loop fastener that goes on a wall and goes on the back of the panel, and you can literally, it has a special system where you pull down on the tab and the tacky adhesive literally comes out, leaves them completely clean. These are so light.
Courtney?
That's exactly what I was going to say. The command strips, I'm a strong believer in those. It's a hard type Velcro. You put one on each side and you can pull it and removes without leaving any marks on any even painted surfaces.
I have to admit, it would depend on how long I'm renting it. If I'm renting it for a while, the thing is if you moved in and you put up, usually if you're renting something, you could put typically nails in the wall so that you can put up your pictures and stuff like that. And then you would pay for those to be spackled and closed up later. I've been in a lot of rented spaces and I have to admit that I just use a staple gun. So I just figure I'll pay for whatever is going to happen later because the holes are very small. And I've done that many times. And so far it hasn't really affected my, any issues. So the other issue though is you can, of course, suspend everything from the walls with 2x4 or with 4x8s. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. My budget can stretch to a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K along with an A10 Mini Pro or Pro ISO. No budget for a 6K or Extreme. Would this be sufficient for a professional appearance as a remote worker? And if so, what lens and tripod would you recommend for this use case? I think that you'll definitely look professional. You can just get the Pro or the ISO or even the regular one is going to be enough for you to do most of the things you want to do if you're not trying to stream. So you might be able to save some money there if you wanted to. I really think that for a standard someone just away is a 24-70 lens, whether it's the Sigma or the Canon, is a really good solution because I find that about 3 feet, it's about 35 millimeters. So if I'm a little closer, I can go a little wider. A little further away, I still have room to zoom in. So the 24-70 seems like a really good range for that. With the 4K, I don't know. I think I use the Olympus 12-42 is the one that I've used in the past, which is a pretty pricey lens. So I have to, and then for tripod, there's a lot of options. Benro, as Guy had mentioned earlier, Benros are pretty popular. Go ahead, Sky.
Yes, I'm going to second vote up the Sigma lens. It's been a great lens for me. It's very the 24-35, I think, or something like that, and it's flexible. It's got a low light level so that you can go into dark spaces, get a nice bokeh with that, depth of field. And as far as your tripod is, you want good strong legs, but it's also that video head, the fluid head concept, and that's what if you're going to be following people around, that's a whole different.
Well, I think this is just as a remote worker, so this is like what we're doing right here.
Then you wouldn't need a big head.
Yeah, I use what I use actually is a triad orbit, and the reason that I use a triad orbit tripod is because the legs go out right at the very bottom. I bought these for doing spherical work, and so that was easier to paint them out. If the tripod is near the spherical camera, you have lots of legs to paint out. If the tripod is away from it, it's easier to paint out the tripod legs. So anyway, so that's but the Triad Orbit's great. It's a little expensive, but it's super heavy and it fits right behind a desk really nicely without needing a lot of space. Next question.
Next one comes from Ryan Jurgen of Columbus, Ohio. During yesterday's MacBlake Weekly, on which Alex is a regular host, Leo's screen feed was a little jittery as watched as part of the YouTube playback. What causes this? And he has a link to the show.
Oh, go ahead, Courtney.
Well, I'm not sure, but I can guess. They use a TriCaster, and Leo uses Linux on that Lenovo that he has in front of him. And Linux is kind of iffy in their video drivers as for getting an exact frame rate out. And so it may be a frame rate discrepancy between the output of his computer and the input into the TriCaster. So it'll be jittery if it's, if he's at 59.94 and it wants 60, or if he's at 60 and it wants 59.94, which is more likely the case, it'll judder or get jittery occasionally.
Next question.
Carlos Ronconi in Rio de Janeiro. Hope I'm getting that right. Hello. Has anyone tried the PHRTF, personalized head-related transfer function from Dolby? If yes, have you noticed a big difference from the standard one?
So what this is the idea that we all hear things differently based on our body build, our head size, or all those other bits and pieces. And so I haven't actually used this one. What I can say is that what this is primarily for is not so much a listener, but someone who's authoring, because they're in headphones, and those headphones make everybody equal. You're hearing everything the same way because the speakers are right against your ears. So if you want to actually model what it sounds like in a larger room or a smaller room, and know that that's relatively accurate, an accurate way to hear it, then you might use something like this. I think that it is definitely a place we want to go. I think right now we're still challenged with doing solid immersive audio, so that I think that the precision is beyond the accuracy of the machine. The precision that it's provided is beyond the accuracy of the machine. But I think that we will probably see more and more of this as we more fine tune that experience. But a lot of this has to do again with, you're mixing in a headphone. How do you make sure that it sounds good in a room or a theater? And a lot of times you have simulators to do that. And the theory behind this is that the simulators need to know more about you so that they simulate it more correctly. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. It's Pretto's 59th birthday. Have you thought about Office Hours Space 2.0 or even 3.0 as your 60th birthday celebration? What improvements, if so, would you make?
Mr. Pretto?
It's a good thing that Fenwick's 4 months older than me. So that's a good thing. Yes, we are working on the next rocket. I'm not going to say too much. I want to keep it kind of private for now. But several of us are working on a plan. We want to pass the Kármán line. So that's going to be the next rocket. That's going to be our goal. And that's 100 kilometers, 330,000 feet, 62 miles.
I just want to know when we're going to send a PTZ to the moon. That's my big thing. We just got to send a little one, land it on the moon, take a picture of Earth. That's all. I think that maybe 62nd birthday. All right. Next question.
Nigel Desau of Austin, Texas. Has anyone had any experience or thoughts on the new Ultimate Ears Fits, FITS? And he's got a link there.
Go ahead, Nigel.
Yes. To the power of advertising on MacBreak Weekly last week, they were showing these Ultimate Ear Fits, which, the normal Ultimate Ear, you have to have your head molded and your brain scrubbed and stuff, and these theoretically do them themselves. And I always struggle with in-ear because my ears get very sensitive, and so I've always sort of looked at that and thought, well, maybe this is a better way to have a more comfortable fit. And I just wondered if anybody had experience of them.
I don't have the experience yet, but I have them right here. So I actually bought them. They didn't send them to me as a host or co-host or whatever. But I have them here. I haven't had time. I'm very careful not to open them because they tell you don't open them until you're going to actually put them on, because I think it's got a hardening plastic that is oxygen based. So basically what you do with these is you open them up, you put them in your ears, and you push a button, I believe, and what it does is it uses light to cure it into your ears and harden to it so that it fits to your ears. So I am, for one of the projects I'm working on, we may end up having, if this works, we may buy a couple thousand. So anyway, so we're trying to figure out I'm doing research on it to figure out whether it works. So I might try to do that on after hours. I'll put it in a schedule when I'm going to actually do it, so we can do kind of an unboxing in after hours to see if it how well it works. It'd be fun if a couple of us got them. I'm not telling everyone to go get them. I don't get any money for that. I'm just saying that if a couple of us get them, maybe we'll put them on and talk about it. Go ahead,
Alex,
David.
real quick, what's the price point?
I think I'm horrible about that.
$169, I think. You get
$169.
$5. Yeah, they also have 8 hours of time on them, which I thought was a good length as well.
Yeah. I'm interested. I'm interested in them for. I think some fun stuff we can do with them. Go ahead, David.
Once they're cured, though, the mold is permanently baked onto the
once you do
itself.
it's done. Yeah,
Okay.
like it comes out as a general thing. You push it in, you let it do the light thing. It then hardens, and then it's your ear. Like you can't. Cool. You will not be lending them to any friends.
I might have to. Well, yeah. Okay, cool. Thanks.
If you do it, try not to open them and warn me about it, and then we'll a bunch of us will do them. It'll be like a group project. Yeah. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So back in 2008, 2009, I was at CES, and there was another company that did this exact thing. We did a video, and I'm trying to find it. I can't find it right now, but it was very similar to the thing. They put the ears in, and then I think they just pulled the thing, and then the phone. What happened was it filled into the ears, and then sat there. I sat there for about 15 minutes for that to harden and work from there. I used those earbuds for a long time. Their biggest problem was they put the left side on the right and the right side on the left, but they worked really well. I think they went out of business simply because of the fact of misfires. So if somebody would put them in and then they get it wrong and they try to get a refund or something like that. So if you're ready to do it, make sure that you're very still. You're in a place where you cannot move, and then no distractions around you, because any little movement could mess that whole process up.
Yeah, Etymotic was doing them at I think it was CES or NAB. There was like a little thing you could just go to their booth and they would fill them out for you. And the problem was that when I got them back, they were just a little hard. You know, like that was the thing for me, is that I just didn't find them as comfortable as just having something soft. And I've been wearing in-ears for 20 years, and so I'm completely insensitive to them. Like I can put almost anything in and leave it for a while. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Sean Johnson in New York. Recently noticed that SDI signal into Blackmagic Web Presenter, both the HD Web Presenter and the original, looks too contrasty and oversaturated in zoom, almost like looking at a CMYK image in the RGB color space. HDMI into WP is fine. Any ideas?
Whoa. My guess is that it's the way it's interpreting it. So there's somewhere in there it's interpreting a different color space, is my guess. And one of them, SDI, might be, if it's contrasting and oversaturated, it would look like it's like, so this is where a LUT comes in a transfer function. And I haven't used the new web presenter recently, so I'm not 100% clear of whether it has a LUT or whether it has any other transfer functions inside of it. So, but that would be the thing that you'd want to look at, is what does it think it's converting from and to, and is that different for those inputs? And because I don't have that piece of hardware, I'm not certain of what's available there, but it could be a transfer that it's transferring like 709, thinking if it got a 709 signal, like a regular TV signal, and it thinks that it's 2020 or HLG and converts to 709 again, it would do exactly what you're talking about. so that could be a potential problem. So take a look at whether there's any transfer functions there. Next question.
Rupert McRae, Dallas, Texas, says, might the proliferation of Starlink actually stifle the economic vitality of new fiber rollout in small town locations and maybe impact the existing business models of rural wireless ISPs?
And I think that's viability for the fiber rollout. And yeah, I think that's actually my biggest complaint about the Starlink. The Starlink is great because it's providing a lot of opportunity, for folks to have that. The big thing is that, it's a Band-Aid over the fact that my opinion is that the government should not, should basically make fiber a utility and do what we did with power and what we did with telephones and what we did with plumbing, and just run it to everybody's house. and the reason for that is it scales for the rest of, the next 50 years. Because if you put glass to the house, you now have, right now it's a gig connection, but it could be a 10 gig connection or a 40 gig connection or a 100 gig connection. As we need more and more content, it would be able to scale with us, as opposed to, what we're doing now, which is like, slightly better than what we had before. It's just more available. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, having had fiber for the last year up until we moved out here, the 1 gig up and down and seamless, constant, extreme bandwidth was such a nice thing to get used to. And I'm wondering if Starlink is that fast, or is there would I have had to downgrade? Yeah. So the fiber gives you the maximum bandwidth, I think, to residential. So I
and
agree
again, it
with
can keep
Alex.
on going. It's that, and it's super low latency. It is, and for the, it would do more. I have an opinion that it would do more for our economic viability, not just fiber viability around the world, around the United States, around the world, if you did it that way, than almost anything else we can do, because suddenly people could be able to be working really seamlessly from home and from anywhere. And so now you're providing those opportunities everywhere. Of course, the politics around that is there's a lot of people that want to keep people in the cities. Go ahead, Courtney.
And the problem with fiber rollout is right away. They have to rent space on utility poles to run that fiber, or they have to get an agreement from farmers and people to run rural fiber across their land. Unless it's done as an eminent domain political action, maybe that could be done with a passage of a Congress bill or something that would allow them to the government to lay fiber and eschew the rights of passage across private land.
I mean, the main thing is we have
Starlink avoids that, obviously. Yeah.
We have two things that are happening together all the time, which is power and telephone. So there's already things there, and getting more room on the pole for fiber is not something that should be. I mean, it can be done. I mean, that the big problem you have now is that the people who own those poles are basically trying to block everybody else from using them, but the government could easily make that go away. Like just say, yeah, we're going to do that. And now, and I believe someone mentioned it here in After Hours, so I don't know. I heard it here, but I didn't see it. That I believe that now by law, if you lay new power in Sweden, it has to be incorporated with fiber. Like you have to literally put the fiber is incorporated into every install of power anywhere in the country, or anywhere you're running cable. And I'm not certain, but for some reason I thought that someone said that it actually is in the power cable. It's just part of that to make sure that they're getting ahead of us. And the country's losing a lot by not having that. Go ahead, Rupert.
Yeah, I really asked on the viability point. I mean, of course, you've got all the pros and cons, but I've been doing some research on this. Some of these smaller outlying areas that have been, thinking about fiber rollouts, particularly these regional telcos. That they've been thinking about it or modeling the economics of it, and that may be something they've been working on for a few years, and it's all measured on the likely demand and the uptake and stuff like that. And a lot of that modeling is having to be changed because those consumers have the choice, and then whatever the pros and cons are of rights of way and whatever, it doesn't really matter. It's just that the numbers have changed.
I agree, and I think that's the problem with it, But I still got one, I got one, and I'm testing it a fair bit, and so far it works pretty well. It's just not very consistent. Like I haven't gotten to a point where it's working all the time. So go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Running past Sweden's idea of running fiber inside the power cables, because that way you'll always have power to run a repeater in the for the fiber at every 10 miles or wherever it's required. It's always there, and it's since it's fiber and it's glass, there's no EMI interference between the power and the signal, so it's perfect.
I think we'd have to do some research on it. Someone mentioned it in After Hours, and so I keep on meaning to research it more and to find out if that's actually how widespread that program is. But I think there's places that that are in the middle of nowhere where Starlink is going to be revolutionary. One of the things that I just haven't had time because of what we're doing right now at the office to go out and I want to go out into the middle of nowhere and put my Starlink up. So right now what I'm working on is how am I going to power it? I'm still waiting for that stupid adapter for that Ethernet adapter. But how do I power it remotely? How do I hook it to, in my case, my goal is to either hook it to Zoom or to hook it to Elemental Link so that I can just, stream, from anywhere. And knowing that it may break up a little bit, but it's better than nothing. Out there. So I'm kind of trying to put together a little kit that's going to let us go into places that we wouldn't go. So I think that there is a lot of I'm excited about what Starlink means, but I am a little concerned that I felt like we were getting close to being like, hey, we have to put fiber everywhere, and now it's much harder to to guarantee the uptake. Although I think that they could exist together, mostly because if you're giving 1 gig to everybody, that just let them have it for 30 days and then take it back. It's like that whole, that's how you get somebody to do something in Vegas. You give them $10,000 to do something and then you ask for it back and they're like, I don't know, maybe. So I think if you gave them it for 3 months or, whatever, and if you're putting it into everybody's house automatically, they're, as a utility, they pay for it no matter what. Like that's what happens is you say, everybody's going to pay it. It's not going to be very much money. And then you can have Starlink if you want, but you're going to have fiber too. Next question.
Here's the last one for this hour. Joe Potter in Mount Pleasant, Wisconsin says we have a monthly show on Facebook Live. Today we use an iPhone 12 Pro Max plus a DJI, I believe Osmo 5, with Saramonic for audio and GVM lights. We want to stream to both Facebook and YouTube and be able to switch to a second camera from above for demos. How can we do this?
Good guy.
Yeah, it depends on how complex you want to make this. I mean, Switcher Studio on an iOS device like an iPad would be the easy way to do it. Stepping up Mimo Live on the Mac or on the PC. I like vMix, and the benefit of vMix is you can push to both at the same time, and you'll get 1080p because you can go through the API with vMix. Otherwise, I'd be going up to caster.io or restream.io so that you could push to both and handle all the comments all in one. So those are a couple solutions.
Good, Jeffrey.
If you want to go the NDI solution, you can get the NDI app on the phone. You can also get something like Amiivo Start that also does NDI. And another alternative to for the iPad, we talked about it yesterday. I talked about it a little bit earlier. Was the Top Director, which is I've downloaded and installed it. It's a great app, especially when you're doing NDI stuff. I had 3 cameras going and then sending it to my vMix and sending it out to the After Hours crew, and nobody could see a difference in the in between the cameras, which was awesome. Restream, StreamYard have free levels, so you send the one stream to them, and then they can split it. But more important, focus on your YouTube over your Facebook, because that's where you're going to get the majority of your traffic.
Yeah, you may get the big thing with Facebook versus YouTube is that Facebook will give you more viewer totals, but if you actually look at your average view time, you'll find that YouTube is generally 10 to 12 times more than Facebook, and that is engagement. The problem is that the feed that brings everybody into Facebook takes everybody out. So you have to be a lot more interesting in Facebook than you do in YouTube at every moment, because literally you have 5 or 10 seconds of slowness, and people will just wander off. And so that's the real problem with Facebook and Twitter. Twitch and YouTube usually exhibit a lot longer dwell times culturally, and also because of structurally, you're going there for something. So just things to think about. You could also use you could also build an SRT ingest for all the different cameras anywhere in the world into AWS, and then build something there that'll stream out to it. By the way, we should do some more AWS days. Maybe we'll see if we can grab some of the usual suspects to do some. I've had some contact with some folks that overseas that are in a pretty stressful situation, and I found out they actually used our AWS sessions to figure some stuff out. So it does make a big difference. So the second hours go a lot further than we expect. So anyway, we should think about ways to continue working on that. Anyway, we are now going to shift subjects to Greenscreen, talking about Greenscreen. And I am going to, we can talk a little bit about removal, and we'll talk about some of the algorithms. I'm not going to get into a specific application because there's like a lot of different ones. And what I will say about Greenscreen removal is that it's all about shooting it. So everything will key well if you give it good data. So we'll talk a lot about, how to think about that shooting process, and how to approach it. Now I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, but I decided we have a lot of questions stacking up. So before we jump into the meat of it, we're going to go ahead and answer some of the questions. It's kind of a different way of managing this, but we're going to jump in. There seems to be a lot of interest here. So we're going to go ahead and answer some of the questions, and then we'll come back and fill in what might make sense after we've answered those questions. I kind of like the idea that we would start with questions when there's a lot of them, and this is generally for second hour, and then nearer to the middle or end, because what happens is we open up and then we answer everybody's questions, and we have questions that are repeating the thing that we just talked about. So on a subject like this, if we have a lot of questions, I think we'll start that way. So let's go ahead and jump into the questions, Bill.
Absolutely. The first one comes from our friend Tlaloc Miguel Lopez Waterman in Salisbury, Maryland. And he says, when using Zoom to bring in remote talent, specifically that you want to work with green screen removal at your or the producer's end, what's the best practice?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Definitely don't use virtual backgrounds to start out with, and try to get a 1080 subject. And as Alex just stated, it's best to shoot it as well as you can. So make sure you have even lighting and the proper lighting to get the best quality, because Zoom is not going to give you a 444 video quality to work with.
Yeah, go ahead, Rupert.
I think this has come up from time to time, and for a variety of reasons, just of some of which Mitchell has covered. It's it's going to be challenging across the board. But again, 1080p would be at least get you in the right direction. Anything other is going to be a challenge, and of course, just a stable pipeline, no Wi-Fi and all that stuff, because you've got to do your best to get the image as stable and as high res as possible.
A good guy.
Yeah, if you're going to do it through Zoom, keep in mind that it's going to drop you to 720. Even if you are a 1080 account, it'll drop any virtual background down. The big tip is to say, I have a green screen, and actually use a green screen and click that little eyedropper and hit the green. And that will key way better for a green screen in Zoom if it's a must. The way we would do it is we would keep at the higher end, we would keep the conversation in Zoom, but then we would use an SRT feed up, and then we would do the compositing in a higher bit rate on vMix in the cloud. That's the way that we would do it, but not everybody has that luxury. But that's at the top end how you could pull it off, or even fiber the switch or something like that at the highest end.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, yesterday we talked about remote rigs, and I showed you my remote rig. That was one of the things we did was we had Zoom on the side, and we had the remote rig in front of their face, so we could go 4K, 8K in capturing the video. For the green screen, the best practice is to send them a sheet and say if they don't have a green screen and they want to put one up, you kind of risk the fact that they might go down to the fabric store and find a green sheet and think that that's going to be a green screen for them. And being able to send them a document that says, if you go to the fabric store, this is the type, this is the model of fabric that you get, and this is how much of the fabric you want to get, and make sure that you have it ironed, and just give them a document on how to set up the background, green, chroma, whatever, and or blue for that matter, and just and hope for the best that they follow those instructions.
Go ahead, Chris.
Quite often we like to talk about best practices. When we were out in the desert, I had been told that there was going to be an elaborate green screen background for Vienna coming in remotely into our feed. And literally in the minutes prior to going live, I was told, yeah, that's not going to happen. I was like, oh, great. She had a green screen, and I said, what would happen if you yanked it down right now? And she goes, it's just a blank wall back there. It's like, okay. And I think in the last couple of minutes, we went through a couple of different backgrounds. She was literally just using the Zoom green screen replacement. She did have a good background. They had prepared for a good key, and the reality was we got what we got. I think we maybe even changed the background after the first time we went to her. I can't remember now. But the reality of production is sometimes you get what you get. Now, we had a lot of problems, so I wasn't criticizing it, but the quality of Vienna's key being done in Zoom was the least of our issues, so we went with it.
Good, David.
Much to everyone's chagrin, this is actually a green screen behind me and a picture of my own usual background. So there you go. I'm in the office. We've got LED lighting above. I brought a little fill light in to light up the screen behind me. But
and are you keying it with Zoom?
Yep. That's not too shabby. For what it is. I mean, now that it's been exposed, you can kind of probably see some of the fuzziness and all, but I got past everybody. I fooled my boss too the other day when I was first day back in the office, and this is how
Can you share the green screen again?
Sure. It's this might be one shadow from my note on how to nap, which is always kept handy. But
you really have a word of the note for how to nap going.
Yeah. It's from the New York Times. Tells you how to nap. But yeah, so it's not too shabby. This little it's a LumaCube little mini light that I have just to flush it out. Yeah.
That's good. It's very good. Go ahead, Bill.
I will say it's gotten easier over the course of my career to pull a decent green screen, but I don't think it's any easier than it ever has been to pull a great one. It is just, you get down to those little fiddly details. To me, the three big things you have to understand is lighting first, and just managing to get an even field of light at the right levels, particularly both on the green screen and your talent. The second thing you have to work on is literally the technical keying stuff, and that has gotten better in your computer or whatever you're pulling it for. And the last one that people forget, I think, most often is the room geometry of it, and just making sure that you have separation so spill light doesn't infect your subjects. Those have always been the three pillars upon which I've built all the green screens that I've ever done. But Alex is an expert on it, so let's listen to him. He really knows his stuff about this.
I mean, the first thing you said, best way to do it. so I just we'll scale down, but the best way to do it is send them an Ultimat with a composite components green screen. Put the green screen at minimum of 5 feet behind them. Use green bulbs. That'll be the best way, and you can get every little hair. One of the things that you can do is, if you can, you want to try to key it before it goes into Zoom. So you can key with Zoom. I mean, we're talking about doing this, but if you can use like the keyer within the ATEM minis is really good, and so if you can get the footage into there first, then you're able to key you get more of the little details of your hair and so on and so forth. You'll notice David's key looks great. Part of what makes that work is, the other thing to look at is that part of what makes David's work is, I don't know if the vanishing lines are perfect, but they're not too far off as far as kind of figuring out the camera angle that he was in. Mm-hmm. The closer you can get, if you look at back in the very old days of office hours, you'll know that I keyed with the same camera at the same height. The background was shot with the same camera at the same height, the same rotate. Literally, I picked it up carefully, moved it over to where I wanted it, framed it without changing anything, just found a place to put down the camera and took a picture, from the camera, or took a small video record. That's so a big piece of selling a green screen is that the vanishing points work, that it doesn't look like it's weird, and the closer, you don't have to get perfect, but the closer you get to that, the better it'll look. Even green screens that are far enough back. Elgato makes some kind of fun ones that you can kind of pop up. The one that pops up is 5 feet wide. It's not wide enough to put it far enough back. The larger one that you have to pull down, I think, is closer to something that will work. As far as that goes, and it's nice and even. I have been using composite components screens forever. That's a Lycra, and we cut them to scale. We put them on stuff. There's a lot of different ways we do that. So those are things that Lycra works really well, because Lycra lets you spray paint it out. So not spray paint, spray water. So you basically stretch it, spray water on it, and all the wrinkles will be gone in a couple hours. So, and if you leave it up, you're in pretty good shape. Yeah, go ahead, David.
This one is pretty much right behind me. It's pretty tight, and the camera I'm using is a Brio, which the company got me. It's doing its own throttling there, but it
looks really good. It's a really good. it's a really good key for it's definitely a good key for what you have there. I mean, it's one of the better keys I've seen on Zoom, and this is Zoom doing the background.
Yeah. It's my picture of my background from my setup at home. Right. And Chris actually gave me one other one. Hold on, where is that? I'm going to put that one in if I can. He gave me the swipey background. So in case you like the green, we can do the green, but then in a few seconds, it'll do the... Thank you, Chris.
That's good. It's great. Let's go to the next question.
The next question comes to us again from Tlaloc Miguel Lopez Waterman in Salisbury, Maryland. Can you expand on the difference between chroma and linear keys?
Yeah. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, chroma uses color, usually red, green, or blue, typically, whatever color is not in the foreground element. And luminance or linear keys, I believe that's what you're referring to, is done with the brightness levels. Like you have 255 white. Generally, everything else is not quite that high, and you can pull a key from that. So I think that's what you meant by linear.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, people confuse that all the time, linear versus luminance. Because chroma keys these days, they used to not be linear, and it was a big deal when they went to linear chroma key. Linear means that it proportionally replaces the green or whatever your key color is with a proportional value of the replacement image. In other words, if you're seeing green through a piece of smoked glass, it will if it still sees the green, it will pass the replacement image at a proportion equal to the luminance of the green that's making it through. That's a linear key. And a luminance key is based on a linear as well, but it just uses the luminance and not the color to set the clip point at which it will pass the image along. And you can set it to have a little wider or narrower clip range to clip a luminance key, and it uses white versus black to choose which source is going to be shown.
Yeah, the chroma key is basically, if you think about 0 to 255, when you sample something from a chroma key, it says, okay, I'm sampling this, and then you say how wide you want it. So then I'll sample above and below a certain amount. So when you're opening it up, to gather it, you're just basically saying around this, it's the chroma information, the chroma value of that. And so you're basically saying what's the center point, and then how far am I willing to go up and down to go grab it, And so that's how a chroma key works. And it works okay. It's because it's really a very easy operation from a mathematical perspective, because it just says, if my value is 112, go down to 92 and up to, it just says, and I'm just looking for things that have that chroma value, whether it's red or green or blue. What a difference key does, or a linear key, is what we call a color difference key. It literally is color differencing. So basically, let's say you have a green screen. You take the values, and when I say take the values, think of when you're doing a green screen operation, this is a pixel operation. So you have a pixel, and it's that value, and it does it to every pixel all the way across and down. And so there's no convolution kernels, there's no nothing else. It just says this value is, let's say, 255 by 192 by 128. I don't know what that is, but that's the red, green, and blue values that might be there. It's all math. What shows up as a color for you, but you want to think about them as numbers. It's really important. And really, in this case, it's not really 0 to 255. It's really 0 to 1. So it's looking at that information there. Now, the thing is that when you have a green screen, when you look at a green screen key, the main thing is that green is going to be hopefully very near 1. Like that's, the green for the green. So that's the highest value. Green is really high, and red and green and blue are lower, But where the person is, that's going to be much more even. And so what happens is that if you take the color that isn't the keying color, which is red and blue. So you take red plus blue divided by 2 it takes the average of those two. So it just averages out the ones that we want to get rid of. And then it's G minus this. So G minus that is the basis of that key. So it's basically, it's taking the average of red plus blue, and then it is subtracting it from green. And what happens with that is that a lot of times these in the center area where there is no green, hopefully, when you subtract those, it turns black. Because it goes to 0. Basically it's black is 0. So when these values are, when G is very low, let's say it's 23, and red and blue averaged is 180, and you subtract that, you're now into black, right? So the key there is that now you have. It's a much more refined, the bottom line is it's a much more refined key, and there's a lot of other ways to deal with that math. And so, but it's a much more refined way to do that math than just the chroma, like I'm just looking up and down. And so you get a much more refined key, and you have a lot more things to pull on. So you can sit there and pull on, you can do, how is it leans more towards the blue, leans more towards the red. You can favor those as you do that math equation. And so that's what a linear key actually does. And that's what's used in the ATEM Mini. And it's a lot more, again, a lot more nuanced from that. And so that is roughly the way that those two differ from each other. The chroma being easier to calculate. At this point, though, a Luma key can be calculated, obviously, on a FPGA. So it's a relatively easy thing because they're still only pixel operations. Next question.
Next one comes from Ryan Jurgen in Columbus, Ohio, and he says a clean vMix key has always eluded our small production team. What are the basics to get the best results out of vMix? Is there a better alternative software for live or multi-camera keying? And he says, sadly, Ultimat is out of our budget.
Good guy.
Yeah, you're not going to get a good key out of vMix. it's crude as far as what the options are. It was never really meant to be like highly professional. So I would do it outboard. Even the $295 A10 Mini has an amazing keyer in it. I mean, amazing. Like you couldn't spend a couple $1,000s a few years ago and get that great of a real-time keyer. So I would kick it back out and do that, or otherwise you're just going to fight it in software. That I'm not even sure if there's any real-time software that I would trust over an A10 Mini.
Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I just wanted to note that Ultimat, which was the gold standard for keying for many years, has made software algorithms now that are in some of the more common NLEs and things like that. So you actually don't have to stay away from Ultimat if you want to explore that. Now, their system across the board, what made it so fabulous in the old days was they had specific paint, specific algorithms in their software, and specific recommendations for lighting and things like that. So the whole system from top to bottom was tuned up. That's not available for you just in the software, but you can get Ultimat keying if you want it.
Yeah, but if you're talking about, definitely in post, you can definitely get Ultimat keyer. I don't find that the Ultimat keyer, I don't find it to be very modern for the software version of it. I will say that even, the stuff that the key light that's built into After Effects and the keyer that's built into Final Cut Pro and the keyers that are available in Resolve are probably a past Ultimat as far as the quality from a software perspective. Go ahead, Chris.
What keeps software keyers from being as good as the keyer that's in the A10?
I think that their software engineers don't understand it. Like I just don't think that I don't think that people understand the math of how to pull a good key. It's really not that hard. Like a lot of the math is, to do the math the way the key light does it and everything else. Some of it was patents for a while because people, Ultimat and other people had patents on how they processed it but most of the solid patents are there. And the reality is that inside a conduit, I could build my own key with the math that I just showed you, and I would get a better key than most software keyers with just nodes, and barely any complex math, So it's really not, what's funny is that after all these years, I'll talk to software folks and I'll go, hey, I'll even for like a real time, like a vMix or other things like that, I'm happy to tell you how to, how to key this. I just need the keyer to work. So I'll tell you what the math is to make that work. And people are always like, oh, we got to figure it out. The only ones that ever said that, oh, we have it figured out, and then they had it figured out was before Blackmagic bought Ultimat. I offered to give them, some equations that would make this a lot better. I was like, your chroma key is horrible. And they're like, oh, we're working on it. And I was like, sure, that's what everyone tells me. Then they bought Ultimat, and I was like, okay, they really are working on it. But it's not literally, if everyone just moved to linear keys, and not using, I think that they just put chroma key in because the programmer doesn't know any better. And they just go, oh, we'll just put a chroma key in. And that's what Apple did for Final Cut. And that made me so much money, like millions. Not me, but my company.
Yeah. It seems like the marketing says to engineering, we need a feature called chroma key. And then the engineers go and look up, a 50-year-old book or 40-year-old book. What is a chroma key? And then they do that. And then they go, and then marketing says, oh, can I say we have chroma key? Okay, good, done. Yeah. And then they put it on a bullet point on a chart and they go to sell it to the public.
Right. And it's a really a bummer because, or you get someone who gets really creative. They get excited. Like I haven't used it recently, but like I opened up, I've done a lot of Greenscreen and we've developed Greenscreen platforms, and I opened up Mimo Live, for instance, and I couldn't figure out how to use the keyer. Like I was just like, and that's a programmer that just went, overboard in trying to make it so powerful that it made it unusable. Like I just couldn't understand. I was like, I don't know understanding what these handles mean.
Well, to be fair, you have my money for Conduit, and I could never understand anything, but I never understood it. So I think I'm going to challenge Mr. Lindsay, you, to create the ultimate, this is how you make a keyer video that we put on YouTube. And you say, and this is to anybody creating a piece of software that does video switching and video compositing. Right. This is how you make a keyer. And make that be the standard. Yeah. Make that be the standard for the future.
In my copious free time, I'll work on.
Right.
I'm like 60. I got like 60.
I think you have a little time this weekend. You ought to be able to crank that out.
I got something this weekend. Anyway, Mitchell.
Yeah, Chris, you can't call it the ultimate keyer because ultimate would
Not
suit.
ultimate, but ultimate.
You were close. You were too close there. You know what's very interesting about ultimate is that in the old days, I used to shoot with a live ultimate, and we ran 2 tape machines, one for the cutout and the other for the video, and we would test it on the site, but there wasn't that much software available at that time. And when software came around, it was okay. I've got the dongle sitting behind me for the ultimate dongle. And it did a lot of the things like the cleanup, sampling, matte, all that stuff that a lot of software emulates today. So I want to give cred to Ultimate for doing it best. But like Alex says, there's probably better math and algorithms out there now.
Yeah, and what I will say is that while the ATEM keyer is really, really good because it's using some of the Ultimate algorithms, the Ultimate itself, the hardware that they still make, is still unbelievable. Like it takes it to, like, no matter how good you think it is, it takes it to an entirely different level. You can key like water in glass with all the little bits and pieces. If you have a good green screen, like I want to keep on coming back to this because we just talked about all this esoteric stuff. A good even green screen, which I'll talk about in a little bit, is the key. Like it is the key to do this. And I have literally done great keys, better keys than a lot of broadcasters, with a little Canon HV20 and a piece of roll of green screen that, like the roll that you would buy for a photographer, like just that kind of green roll down. And I went to Walmart and I bought some shop lights, the shop lights there. The only thing I did was I swapped out the bulbs for the KinoFlow green bulbs, and then I put them onto that, and it keyed perfectly. So if you know what you're doing with that process, and again, what we had a problem with is that I had to produce so much of it, 10 or 11 hours a week of green screen footage that had to be at very, very high quality. And at that point, you either were going to be perfect at what you did, or you were going to die, like as a production person. So that's what kind of helped us. We spent lots of time studying green screen because it was all about hours of labor hours to fix it. Next question.
Tlaluk is back with, when doing a chroma key live, is it necessary to capture your video in 444?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Well, actually, necessary and want are two different things, but 444 is good because that's referring to the bits that are being sampled, RGB 444. That's as good as it gets on most recording. I usually ask for 444 if I can get it, and also ask for it to be shot 4K if it's for a 1080 production. Because the more resolution I have, the better chance I can eliminate the little sparklies and the jaggies and the aliasing on curved surfaces, things like that.
And I believe it's actually YUV, and that's important because the Y is the luminance. So you can't have red be oversampled and so on and so forth. So you have luminance at 4, and then it's how many pixels are being dedicated to the channels that are carrying the UV. Go ahead, Courtney.
And if you're talking about live compositing and not recording necessarily, you're compositing before it goes out, you want to make sure your SDI connections, which your camera is generating or your background is generating, has a high enough bandwidth to like a 3 gigabit or greater, 6 gigabits even better, to give you the 444 uncompressed HD into your chroma keyer, so it has 444 to work with. Otherwise, the encoder in the camera a lot of times will compress it down to 420 or 422 or 420.
Yeah, the main thing there is that any device that goes through may be at a 422 pipeline, and then at that point you're not getting what you thought you were going to get. Sometimes it doesn't go through at all, like it's just confused by what it just saw. Other times it will put it through, but it will transform it. And to underline what's actually happening here is that you have 4, 4, 4. This is the Y, the U, the V. It's the interaction of U and V. It creates the color, and so this is actual the pixels. So for every 4 pixels, I get 4 pixels of U and V, which means that the color is the same resolution as the black and white. What a lot of us work with is 422 as a delivery. That means I have literally, if you think about it, the image, your luminance image is one size, and your color is this size, just stretched out to cover it. Turns out that we pay it, what we consider sharp is the luminance information, and the color can be kind of much lower resolution, 411, 420, Those are all things we can throw away that color data, and as long as we keep the chroma or keep the luminance data up. That works fine for delivering stuff to you for TV, but it's a bummer for, it means that you're keying basically something that's half the resolution of your main image. And that what that ends up doing is along edges here, especially angled edges, you'll see a little stair stepping, and that stair stepping will be like when we used to do it in DV, it was much worse. So, but that stair stepping shows you the resolution that you're dealing with. Now, one way that you can get around that is if you have, if you have a 1080p output, you can key it at a 422 signal at 4K, and that's using like let's just say an ATEM switcher. You could key it at 4K and then scale it down to 1080p, and most of that stair stepping will go away. In fact, early parts of office hours, that's exactly what I did. Is I would be keying into 4K at 422 and then dropping it down, and then that basically throws away the pixels that were going to be problematic. Go ahead, Courtney. Did you have? Oh, maybe someone else.
Oh, I already went.
Okay, yeah, it's confusing when people turn theirs off. Someone put their hand up, and then I just looked at the last one. All right, next question is from Daniel Goldstein. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Bill.
Oh, okay. Daniel Goldstein, Baltimore, Maryland. How difficult is it to drywall the curved part of the cyclorama wall for a green screen studio? Can any competent drywall tradesperson do so, or does it require special skills, drywall, aka sheetrock, gypsum, or plasterboard?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
The answer is no, because you're going to have a smooth surface that goes beyond what most painters or drywall experts are used to, unless they specifically know. But get a lot of sandpaper, a lot of drywall, a lot of painting, and drywall, cover it, do it again. It's just a very long and drawn-out process to get it exactly, because you're always going to see that little line run through it.
And I think that the question that they have is the curved part is the hard. Yeah.
The point where the curve meets the wall.
But I think he's asking about how to build the curve itself.
Buy the parts.
Yeah. Go ahead, Rupert.
Yeah, so in terms of how to do it, quite often you'll find some pre-formed tracking that you'll use as a kind of template that will go behind, and then a lot of those guys will score the back of the drywall and form like a kind of concertina thing, and then skim over it in multiple coats, like Mitchell said. Now, as for any tradesperson, again, just like's been said, you get a lot of tradespeople like that their core competence is more standard work, and that's fine. But when it comes to something specialist, you want to find somebody who specializes in special work.
No, go ahead, Sky.
And the specialized is ProPsych. It's just south of Portland, Oregon, in a place called Clackamas. I just wanted to say that's just a fun word. But no, they have been doing this exact job for many years, and they've got forms that you can buy in varying sizes. They've got installs physically around the globe for decades. So they really know what they're doing. They use their product at home, and they're just wonderful people as well. But if you get that and then hand that to your tradesperson, you got a lot cleaner opportunity of getting as smooth edge as possible.
Good, Courtney.
Yeah, and they usually don't use drywall. I think that most of them use Luan or some type of wood type material that is scored so that they can bend it, or steam bent in some cases where they can bend it and conform it to a curve. And they'll generally cut out of plywood curved forms, and then they will bend that Luan over the curve in the background and then attach it that way. That achieves that curved surface because it's hard to bend drywall. The ProPsych is the way to go. don't try to do these curves on your own, especially the corner. The corner is quite a thing. We did a bent wood one exactly the way Courtney did it in a green screen for one of my offices, and that was not something we should have ever done. The geometry has to be absolutely perfect, or you can't light it. And so you just want you buy the ProPsych will make just the curves. You can buy just the curves and then add drywall to it, but they also build all the pieces. And if you can afford all the pieces, it's great because it has all the grooves for the plaster and everything else, and it goes together and it's relatively modular. You can take it down and put it up if you want. It's the best. Next question.
Jeff Vreeland in Indianapolis is up next. What's an inexpensive green screen for home office or Zoom users?
Go ahead, Matteo.
I am using a real inexpensive green screen now. I can show you. It's this one, and I'm not very well lit, and the screen is not even ironed nor anything. But I'll try it now with Zoom and see how it works. I'm going to put a green screen on Zoom now. And I'm going to put a virtual background. So this is what it looks, completely unironed and not well lit on Zoom. As you can see, there is a border here that is not well finished, but this is only $30. So
one thing you want to look at here is also you'll see a white edge along that black shirt. And that white edge along the black shirt is from the sharpening within the camera. So so that's one little tip there is to turn. It's hard to do that with a webcam, or with a smaller camera. But if you can turn off your sharpening, you can sharpen that later or put it in somewhere else. But when you see that little white edge, a lot of people wonder. And what I do to fix that a lot of times, I don't wear black shirts. So when I do keys, because it's just where there's a high. What happens? How sharpening works is it makes the one area a little brighter and one area a little darker. That's how all sharpening works. And when you have something that's a lot of contrast, which is in the green channel, you'll end up with a little white edge. It did a relatively good job, given the quality of the screen. So it's pretty good. Oh yeah, go ahead, David.
The screen I bought this before even finding out about office hours. When we were first sent home, it's from a company called Valera. It's a 70-inch pop-up thing with tension rods behind it, and it's on a little tripod thing, folds up into a bag like a rifle, and it's like I say, it's right up against me, so I'm kind of locked in for now. So.
Go ahead, Sky.
Yeah, I put a link in the Mukana for it's called Westcott is the manufacturer X. And it's very portable. They do signage this way as well, but it stretches the material. It's a great, again, the polyester type of material. So when it stretches from corner to corner, you get a nice tight edge. It folds down into a small little bag also that you can travel with if you need to or move it someplace else. Just don't trip over it because it is made of aluminum and it will bend and break very easily. Ask me how I know.
Yeah, and I'll still keep on coming back to composite components. I've used them for over 20 years, and you can buy them. They're not the cheapest; they're going to be more expensive, but they're Lycra. They can be stretched to anything. I just buy things when I either use you can buy those stands. I have a couple of these with just light poles up with a bar that goes across, and then pull it tight. But you can also, show up anywhere and just pull the Lycra tight to anything, and it will be nice. I mean, I've gone to the hardware store and got PVC piping. In fact, I might even have pictures of that. It's just a nice all-encompassing way to solve that. Next question.
Next one comes to us from the Seventh Scroll, the team in Brooklyn. And even with the right green screen lighting and key, does movement in front of the green screen, the talent moving around in frame, affect the quality of the video live streamed over time?
I'll go ahead, Rupert.
I think this is a good example of where your mileage will vary depending on whether you're in software or hardware. In software, the more movement you got, just the more processing it's going to have to do, and that's more chance that those resources on your system are going to be under contention from some other process. At least if you're in hardware, you've got a better chance of that pipeline being reserved for you and there being the appropriate amount of resources ready to process it. So I think that's just a difference you'll see.
You go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, it's a good test for it. It's just take your hand and go like that and watch what the shutter is doing on your camera. And if it turns into a big sludgy mess, it's because they probably have the wrong shutter speed. And even in post, you can't really put something back in there that wasn't there. But if you capture it as well as you can with the proper shutter speed, in post, I usually apply motion blur. And that works, and some of the plugins actually have that in it to allow you to clean that up so you get that. But to be honest with you, most of the time it's a talking head or movement, unless you're doing a Hollywood film, not a lot of motion.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, Mitch covered it pretty well. The motion blur is your enemy here. And if you light at a much brighter light, or you will eliminate in most digital cameras, they compensate for aperture rather than a actual leaf shutter. They will use a longer sampling time if it's underexposed. So make sure you have enough light to expose your character. You'll get less motion blur, and it will shorten the capture time, because motion blur, of course, gives you in front of the green, gives you a luminance key that may not be able to be handled in real time by your keyer.
Yeah, Motion blur is what sets apart keyers. So if you go like, you'll see exactly what Mitch had talked about. I will almost immediately go up and I'll look at something and I'll pick up a glass, usually like a bottled water, and I'll look at it like this, and then I'll go like this. And that's and all I'm looking for is like, how do you deal with things that are hard? Not doing an easy key with everyone just sitting there is relatively straightforward. Doing things where people are waving. If you have a good key, if you have a really good lighting, you have a really good keyer, you have it well set up, you can do this and the motion blur will actually work. It doesn't work when you have a poor key. That's where things start to kind of come apart. Next question.
Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas says, when should a green screen be a blue screen?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, in the olden days, there was a lot of technical reasons with these 420 codecs, and there was just better efficiencies. And so I would take a look at what you're shooting. And like someone with blonde hair, for example, if there was spill and green, the opposite of green to do spill suppression would be magenta. And so you would have problems with blonde hair. And so it was easier to do blue because the opposite's yellow, and so it was easier to pipe that in and take care of it. I would look at the end-to-end workflow, what the characters are going to be wearing, if it's something where somebody's going to be acting, or if it's a company, if the company has blue shirts, I mean, obviously you're going to want to go green. So I think it comes down to, the wardrobe and then the workflow.
Go ahead, Bill.
Everything Guy just said. And, I used to do a lot of work for PetSmart. And when we were working in the aquarium department, I actually used red screen a lot. And the reason I used red is because obviously it didn't appear in the aquariums and all the aquatic stuff as much as blue and green both did. But you get into some circumstances where, you just have to look at what you're shooting and make a decision. Most everybody use green now because the math has gotten better, the tools have gotten better, everything has gotten easier, and you can usually pull a key unless you're in really odd circumstances.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
For some reason, a lot of sporting events seem to like to use blue. I know why they would on our local team, because the Eagles in Philadelphia wear green uniforms, so obviously that wouldn't work. But for some reason, I think Alec could explain better than I can. Blue seems to end up on sporting events.
I go with Courtney.
Yeah, what everyone has said. Yeah, it depends on if you're shooting a product that has green in their label, you can't really change the label of the product. Or if you're shooting a movie with the Green Lantern character, you got to use blue screen because his costume is characteristically green. Sometimes they will actually change the color of the costume and then key out that color as a separate color from the background and adjust it back to its correct color in post.
I got into the habit of I would shoot MacBreak, the video, with a blue shirt in front of the green screen, and then for all of them, we just changed the color of my shirt. So we just go in there and just flip the color. It was just a one blue shirt, one green background, and then there was like 10 episodes with different colored shirts. Go ahead, David.
Just a quick question: the green and/or blue are used because of their opposition to skin tones, or
it has to be one of the primary colors, RGB, and there's a lot of red in our skin. That's the reason we go to one or the other. There's a lot more information, just the way that digital video works. There's a lot more information still in the green. So even at uncompressed, there's more information in the green and less grain. So there's a lot more grain in the blue. The places that we shoot with blue, which is almost never. I think probably 98% of the stuff I've shot in the last 20 years has been on green screen. Started off blue, by the way, but slowly, moved away from that because it's grainier. You'll get less quality on the edges. Night scenes are a lot easier to deal with blue spill than with green spill, and people wearing obviously objects that are not only green but very close to the green screen, like dark plants and stuff. We've easily keyed in front of green screen. Again, if you're doing a very precise key, you can get away with that. Go ahead, Bill.
Oh, I was just going to say, I didn't even know what I was going to say because I think you covered it in the beginning of yours.
Okay.
Let's move on.
All right, next question.
Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh says, for a remote participant with limited bandwidth or low resolution video feed, would it be ideal to have the compositing happen on the participant's end? What potential solutions could be deployed remotely?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Well, you don't want to put it on the remote person because there's a good chance that they don't know how to get it lit properly and produced properly. So what I usually do is I get it both ways. I have them do the best they can and send that to me, and then also have them shoot it and send me the video after the fact, and I can do it in post.
We have done it that way, and what we do is we send them an A10 Mini, and we set it up so that we can do a remote control. And then a lot of times we were doing other things, so we had because we send a full kit. We have a Mac Mini there, so we can see it, and so it works exceptionally well. So that that we have a 6K camera going into a Mini, and then we're keying in the Mini, and then sending that back out into Zoom, and we're controlling that on our end. And so we can tune it to exactly what we want. And it's that, I mean, again, you may be cost constrained to do that, but that worked exceptionally well. Now, next question.
Leland Best in Corona, Michigan says, what's the difference between a chroma key and a chroma key filter?
I don't think there's any difference. I think it's just the chroma key and a chroma key filter should be the same, unless someone's just being lazy with their names. But I don't know of any difference. Next question.
Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas says, what's the best green for Greenscreen? Do we have a hex code or a paint mix formula?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I like to buy it from Roscoe, and I usually get their Ultimate Green. It's very expensive. Things have changed now with certain fabrics, like Alex said earlier. The Lycra is a better because it's a lot less chance of having wrinkles in it. But hex code, paint mix formula, I don't know those, but the more luminance level, the most green level you've got on that paint, the more fluorescent it looks, usually works the best.
Good, Bill.
Also, remember, the reflectance of the paint itself can make a difference in this. So you want flat mixes. You do not want us to have any kind of shiny paint, because that can reflect lights too harshly from instruments in front of the scene, and that'll show you highlights that aren't really supposed to be there.
And I get Composite Components digital green is what I use. I find that the Roscoe green is too blue. There's too much blue in the Roscoe green, and so I don't find it to be as pure as the Composite Components green. We have in a pinch. I usually have a pail or half a pail or some part of a pail of Composite Components green, and I usually dip a stick in it, let it dry, take it to the hardware store, and say, I need that. We should probably be more mathematical about it and give you a mix of stuff. It's always been us basing it on there. But I will say that even when I match the color perfectly, the Composite Components green keys better than me matching it at a hardware store. So there's something about the mixture and exactly how it's reflective and maybe infrared. I don't know. But I will tell you that the reason I'm so religious about it is because there's something they're doing with that color, and there's something that's part of that thing that keys much better than everything else. And I've never been able to figure it out. It's just kind of like magic from my perspective. Next question.
Next one comes from Glenn Mead in Waterloo, Ontario, Canada. It says, is there a green screen kit that gives good results, yet it's easy to set up and use for remote presenters? Would green LEDs and a retro-reflective background, and he's got a link there, be a good option?
Go ahead, Guy.
I'm going to cut over to our friend Photo Joseph. This is a video that he put together with one of those solutions where you could see it's a gray background, but then he puts the Reflect Media light on, and it's just a light ring that goes over the camera lens. And then when he hits the button, you can see that's the light ring. And some of these are just tough to look at after a long period of time. That's the only thing about having it close up. What was that? Oh, sorry. I didn't.
Sorry, I left my mic.
Here's the shot. So here's his blue screen. That's actually a gray screen to the naked eye. So you'll see as we go back, that's the light ring. And then this is usually what I also demo at NAB. I'll show this in a booth at the Reflect Media booth. We'll show how this looks, but the tough part for close up, if you're less than 8 feet away, you can get spill from the front. So you can see him in a blue scene, and if somebody walks in wearing blue, the nice thing is that you can just switch over. So let's see where he switches from gray to, come on, where does he go? Green. Somewhere in here he goes green. But anyways, you can watch the video. I'll put a link in the chat.
Good, Courtney.
Yeah, Guy covered most of it. The ability to go either gray or green. The problem with the retroreflective is it's a fairly delicate screen. Those have little glass beads on them that or little lenticular reflective areas that will retroreflect, and they scar very easily. And once you hit it with a C-stand or something, it'll scar it, and then you'll have a permanent poorly retroreflective screen. The nice thing is you can those little ring lights can be switched between blue and green, so you can switch instantly without having to change your screen itself. But the problem is if you have someone with glasses, they're going to reflect those green lights in their glasses, and you can end up with holes in their face, things like that.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, confirming what Courtney just said. Also smudging for some reason on that glass bead screen. I get some smudging, and I get weird ambient lighting problems. You have to have a proper setup to be able to do it. I like it. It's a great simple combination. There's also somebody that makes a floodlight that's about yay big, and it sort of scans the background and sends a green light onto the background. I forget what that's called. Maybe one of you guys have seen that before. I remember coming across it, but I said, that's a great idea. I don't know if it works.
Go ahead, Bill.
Along with the color, there's also managing the amount of light. And I say that only because one of my first green screens, I threw everything at it. I had 4 Kino flows. I had put green bulbs in them. I wasn't in that big a studio, and I ended up not being able to dim my key lights down enough so that I could light my subject, and I got green spill everywhere, and it was a terrible key. So the ratio of the light on your talent to the light that is lighting the green screen becomes one of the pieces of this formula that needs to be managed well. I know Alex has some formula for how, at what stop level or what f-stop you want to get light off of that, and light meters can actually be helpful in this case, or false color monitors.
And I'll try to get to it. We're running out of time. We may have to have part 2 next week where we do some more demos. My experiment with asking questions at the beginning was effective at getting questions. What I will say is that the issue, number one, is I feel like I'm an ad. I barely know the people at Composite Components. Just I've known Kay and Jonathan Erlin for a long time, but I don't get anything out of saying this. But I just carry those things around because I can pack them, wash them, stick them in my bag. I can set them up in 20 minutes, and it's a great green screen. And I use all kinds of components, with it. And I've had the same ones for 20 years. so they last forever. So as far as something easy to set up, I think that is the key, is to have that. The reflect media, the challenge that we really had was penumbra. So if you're too close to it, there's an incidence issue that you get this little shadow around it. So occlusion and the penumbra were things that we were challenged by when we tested the reflect media. And so we chose that. We found that a good green screen was going to do as good a job. Now, if you're not as technical as we are, I think the reflect media is actually really good because you just have to take care of the screen. We saw the same problem that Courtney talked about, which is we scarred the screen and then couldn't use it. So it's a big gray line. So that's the other issue. And for ours, we take our screens everywhere, outside, inside, up, and we just throw them in the wash. Next question.
Next one comes from Chris Widener in Lafayette. I heard green bulbs. I don't do green screen, but what would this be for?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, it sounds like a great idea. It usually comes with a lot of extra problems with it. The first one being spill, because now you're throwing light everywhere and it's green light. And if it gets on your shoulders, on your hair, the key's gonna have a hard time discriminating between that. But under the right circumstances, they can be helpful, particularly on a big set where you got enough space between the talent and the background.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing for us is that I'm trying to see if I can find the right photo to show you of a green screen here, but is that is what we tend to call green on green. So let me see if I can pop this up here. Well, I'm just going to cut to this screen here. Sorry, 1 second here. I got a whole bunch of stuff here, so we'll so if you look at this here, you'll see these are the green bulbs that we have here. Now, the big thing is they're far enough away from this person and we barn doored them so that they're basically coming across here. Our subject here is not. The subject here is not being hit by that spill because of those barn doors. And sometimes we put flags here if they're a little bit closer. This is that composite component screen that I have here that's pulled against a metal situation. I don't even know where this is in the world. I have to look. Anyway, so that's what the green is. And what that does is, what it does is we were talking about before, you average the two, the red and the blue. What it does when you look at an RGB parade, and we'll do this, I'm going to have to create a second hour of this. When you look at your scopes, you'll see that. You'll see like red is very low, blue is very low, and green is really high. And so that is so that delta between the red and the blue and the green makes it much easier to pull a really clean green screen. And it's probably been the secret to 90% of my green screens is green on green. I'll do it anytime I can because it creates a much bigger contrast to it. You do have to be careful not to peak them too high, to have too much green, because you can easily overdo it. But and you have to flag it, and you have to have enough distance. So it's not something you can do in a pinch or in the corner, but it is something that when you do it for a single person, it's almost impossible to do if you're doing an action film or doing something else. You can't do that because you get too much spill. But if you're doing an interview with someone or basically a knees up with them with green on green, it is basically. You just touch on the green and you'll get every hair, that's there. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I noticed something in your example there, Alex, that you'd have to watch out for, which is reflections of the green bulbs on a shiny floor, because that's going to be a problem if you have your white lights reflected in the floor and your green lights reflected in the floor. That's going to be a compositing problem if you see the floor.
I'll do everything I can to avoid seeing the floor. It's like that. That's an entirely different budget with a client. Is if they want to see the floor, we're going to have a whole different conversation about that. And we do ones where you see the floor, but it's like we definitely know that anything that where the feet are touching the floor and you see them, it's a different budget because it's just a way harder to pull a good screen. And what you end up doing is what we call divide and conquering. So you key the floor, and this is definitely not a floor ready to be keyed. You key the floor separately from the rest of the body, and that's how and then you have to match those two up, and then you have a little problem along the edge that you have to deal with. Go ahead, Rupert.
If you're using the green lights, is CRI also an important consideration for the green as much as it is for white lights?
The greens that we have never measured CRI against those greens. What we've done is, I don't even know if you can buy them anymore. If you can, go buy them. They're really useful. But we bought them from KinoFlow, and they were a specific green, and they are designed to do this one thing. And so as KinoFlow moved away from Kino bulbs, they stopped making them, I think. Go ahead, Bill.
The one place you can still find them often is in rental houses. They will have packs of just the bulbs that you can put in KinoFlows and other fixtures.
Next question.
Rupert McCrae in Dallas, Texas says, what bad green screen advice exists in the wild that users should be cautioned to avoid?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I have a huge, I could write a book about this because clients think that they'll throw something green up and shoot it with their IT department or their in-house video department, and then they'll hand it to me to post it, and it's a problem. It's a huge problem. I heard Alex give some advice once that said, if I'm not shooting it, I'm not posting it, and vice versa, which is excellent advice. The other thing is sort of like an old wives' tale. It's good to shoot like a straw light on the back of their head in order to differentiate from the key. I think that worked back in the old TV weatherman shots, but not so much anymore. It pollutes the shot too much.
Yeah, go ahead, Sky.
Bad advice would be that it's easy.
It can be easy. It's just that it can be easy to do if you technically understand what you're doing.
You've got a truckload of stuff to fix things with. So civilians often don't.
The big thing is that you want to. The biggest thing is to approach green screen as the quality of how you shoot it will make everything else easy. So it's all about what's in camera. That's the thing that people miss the most is they think, oh, you can just go ahead and key it, and you can. But you're going to lose hair detail. You're not going to be able to manage motion blur. You're going to have things fade in and out. There's a lot of things that happen, that are there. And some of it, maybe it matters, maybe it doesn't. If we looked at David Brady's key is great, but he loses some hair detail. And that hair detail is something that is, and that's the thing that you try to hang on to, is that's what really sells the shot, is the little flitty, singular hair detail really makes a big difference. And you can get that, and you can get it on a low budget and it's all about lighting and screen. And that's why I keep on coming back to the screen I use and the lights I use and everything else. The lighting and the screen will make more difference in what you're doing. And then we are going to have to do a second hour next week on this so that I can actually do demos. But but understanding and shooting. The other thing is I'll say is shooting with scopes. I don't care about light meters. Light meters they're too point based. When we talk about light meters, we usually talk about how to get them away from the green screen, because if someone gives us an opinion about a certain spot, that doesn't matter to us. What matters to us is it did matter. So in fairness, when you're shooting green screen with film, the light meter was everything. When you're shooting it with digital, the scopes are everything. And I will not shoot green screen without scopes. And we'll talk about that next week because this one is running out of time. Next question.
Leland Best, what is LumaKey and its uses?
Go ahead, Sky.
Well, we'll dive in deep next week. My simple version is enabling you to create a mask. That's how I've used it in a compositing software such as Resolve, but also in like Photoshop. When you want to change something specific, like my black shirt, into something else, you key out that luminance, light concept, and then you got a mask.
Good, Courtney.
Yeah, it's typically used in downstream keyers because it's much simpler, and you don't have to worry about if you're keying a logo or a lower third in that has green or blue in it. You're not going to have to deal with trying to narrow the chrominance to maintain the color of your product or whatever you're putting in the lower third. So it's easier to do just a luminance key and just make sure there's no 100% blacks in any of your graphics that go in.
Yeah, and this is what we used to do for a long time, and specifically with graphics was the place that we used it a lot because we didn't have a chroma key or we didn't have, this is back in the 90s. And so a lot of us got good at it because that was all we had. And so if you think about, again, 0 to 255, what you're doing is you're saying, I'm going to key out everything below a certain number. So I'm going to get rid of it. And then the second piece of that is I am also going to, there's a range in which around this center point. So the clip is where you're going to clip it, and the gain or whatever is usually, how hard you're going to push that edge, and so you can have that you can have a little bit of a softness there, and then you can just move this dial up and down to decide where you want to select that. And again, it's great for graphics, especially ones that don't have black. If the graphics have black, what you need to do is you will take your black levels and go into levels and go into your output, and you just move it up a little bit. So that makes all your blacks just a little gray. Turns out when you go to broadcast and definitely to zoom, you won't see it. They're increasing the contrast again somewhere. And so you won't see the difference that the black is, unless you're keying something over pure black. You're not going to notice that the black elements are slightly higher. It also, so dark elements like that are harder to key, but that's what we use it for. It actually works better on graphics than chroma key in the graphics. And the reason for that is that the chroma key, the Luma key is at the 4 of the 444, and the chroma key is at 422. So when you key a curved graphic with a green background versus a black background, a Luma key on that black background will look better than a chroma key will, because you're not subsampling the color. Next question.
Leland Best again. It says, what is anti-aliasing and how does it affect chroma key, and in what ways can it be adjusted?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Alex just touched on it about the subsampling. If you're sampling at 444, you have the best number of samples to be able to accomplish getting the shoulder line or the curve there. If you're shooting with DV, remember that? It's like 420, I think it is. There's a whole lot less information to work with, and that's why you get the stepping, because there's not enough samples to complete that smooth transition from one part to another. And it usually results in a chroma key with a chatter. You can get chatter on your shoulders or around your head, or other artifacts, which are very painful.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, it's actually matching transparency into the edges of a key or a dividing line between, so that it softens the transition between chroma key and not chroma key and gives you the impression of a cleaner line rather than the stair-stepping that he was just talking about.
Yeah, so it's creating those in-between grays. The aliasing is typically what we see. Like if you look at a font that isn't anti-aliased, you'll notice that it's just black. It'll be jagged going around the font, around the curves, and it's adding those extra grays that are there. The most powerful way to do anti-aliasing is what we call oversampling, which means that and that's what I talked about earlier. You key at a higher resolution than what you need, and then you bring it back down, and that is oversampling the image. So for instance, even if I had an 8K camera or a 12K camera and I wanted to output 1080p, I'd still capture at 8K or 12K if I could, because then I can sit there and key it and then bring it back down and oversample and get nice pretty edges. Along that, I have more data to work with. Next question.
Craig McFarland in Boston, Massachusetts says, I see some green screens that are darker like forest green and some that are more like lime green. Is the lime color that much better?
Yeah, go ahead, David.
Well, for Craig in Boston, the only green that you're going to see that is like that lime green is on St. Patrick's Day, or maybe a couple fish or things that are unnatural or not as common as that forest green. So that's probably why that color is being used.
Yeah, I feel like the forest green must be cheaper because it's not better. Definitely, never, at ever. Like the forest green is not good. Next question.
Next question, moving on. Alani Nelson in San Antonio. Have you ever used a magenta gel on back or hair lights to help with spill?
We used to, but the keyers have gotten so much better that you now can see it. Like, because they're, it used to be that the keyer was so bad and so rough that you would use magenta to offset those spill, but the unspill operations that we have in most of our keyers now is so effective that you're more likely to see that magenta than you were before, because there's nothing to even out anymore. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, what would be better for compositing in post, Final Cut or Resolve?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Well, in the perfect world, they'd both be fine. But usually I get stuff that isn't perfect, and I use After Effects because I've got a lot of tools.
I find that the Resolve keyer is a little bit more intuitive than the Apple. The Apple keyer is really good too. I mean, both of them are exceptional. You're going to make more of a difference in your key with the way you shoot it than the way either one of those works. For some reason, the Resolve one makes more sense to me, but the Apple one is exceptional. I'll go with John.
When I first started using DaVinci Platform, I used to go into Fusion and key out there, but now I'm keying in Edit, and I think it's called Delta Keyer, right in Edit, and it works fantastic.
Yeah, it's really good. Next question.
Andre Dola in Berlin. How many light sources do I need at a minimum to light a green screen well?
Go ahead, David.
Yeah, I'm just using this one little 7-inch LumaCube at 3200, and the above lights are closely matched. Mm-hmm. It's doing pretty decent, I think.
Yeah,
fooled you guys.
I will say you came in another day or whatever, and I thought I was like, oh, he's using his background, using thing as a digital background. So, but it was, I thought it was good. Go ahead, Mitchell.
2.
Go ahead, Sky.
Yeah, I'm going to recommend 2, but also remember you've got your foreground lighting issues, and what you're asking about is your background. So it depends it depends how big, how wide, how tall, how far away. Those are components to ask yourself.
Good, Bill.
Yeah, if it's just head and shoulders shot, you can get away with fewer than if you're talking about somebody standing and walking around on a stage. So it really has to do with the shot.
Yeah, if you go back and look at what I just showed earlier, so I always am trying to key the persons completely separately from the green screen. So and I try to make those sources the larger the sources for the green screen, the easier it will be to key it. You have big soft sources. And the reason for that is that a smaller source will start to pick up wrinkles and everything else as well. So you'll start to, the smaller sources build more shadows. And so by having big diffuse sources, you tend to do a bit better that way. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is interested in the Lytra Touch Light, and then he says, on top of my monitor, would that be efficient light to clean the key with a Blackmagic Cinema camera 4K or 6K?
I wouldn't. Again, I would be building something that's a larger source behind you with the green screen behind you. So you're not trying to. Here's the problem: is that trying to light yourself and trying to light the green screen exactly where both should be. It's very hard to do both at the same time. By separating your lighting so that your lighting is separate from the green screen lighting, you can adjust the green screen to be exactly the way it should, and you adjust the way you should be exactly the way you should be lit, and you get both of them. Otherwise, you're getting kind of a muddy average between the two, and it doesn't work as well. So we went over with just questions. So I think the green screen is a popular subject. I decided to go ahead and see what we did, what happened there. I do have a presentation that we didn't get to today. So we will do this again next week, but we will start with the presentation. And then we'll go into the questions. So we'll walk through this again. It seems like it was popular enough to do this again. Great questions from our producers. Great questions, great answers from the panelists. Thank you. We can't do this without you. It's good day. We were just cutting that first hour. We were crushing our velocity, and it was good. It was just good, solid answers, coming out. It was really, really well done by the panelists and by the producers. I think had to keep up with the panelists answering the questions so efficiently. So it was good 2 hours. So anyway, great job to everyone. And tomorrow, of course, we'll be talking about working with talent. And I put up a thing as a note, if you didn't see it in the email that went out, of, if people are around here and if you're remote or if you're in LA, we're doing some experiments, and I can't get into it too much right now, but on YouTube. But if you want to play, you can fill out the form that I put out, and we can talk about that more. Anyway, thanks so much. See you later.
Okay, it's whispered.
Now everybody wonders what I was talking about.
Whisper.
It's too bad.
Hey, John Pretto.
If you're watching this on Alex Lindsay, if you're watching this on YouTube, I can see the names. JJ McKinn. Look, there's JJ. I see my JJ's name.
Maybe we can get a
Jeffrey Powers.
record for weirdest show on YouTube.
I know. No, that's the idea. The goal. We have a goal now. Everybody has a goal.
Is tomorrow the
Go
first?
have lunch. Bye. Office hours.global.
2 hours. Bye-bye. What are they talking about?
Happy trails to